Welcome to another episode of An Extraordinary Take, where we share extraordinary ideas and visions with extraordinary people. My name is Bo, your host, and I'm so excited that you were able to join me for this episode. Let's get into it, shall we?
Hello. My name is Sbo, and I get the pleasure of doing this with you guys and just sharing different thoughts around different topics. And I'm so excited for today's one because it was so impactful for me, and it just helped me look at my life in a different way than I think I would have, or rather than I think that the circumstances were pushing me to. So today I want to speak about perspective. It's one of my favorite things, and I'm sure you already know this, but perspective is basically just a viewpoint, the way that you see a situation or a particular circumstance. And obviously, different people have different perspectives. So for the most part, you will respond in quite a similar way to different situations based on your core perspective, or rather your core belief. What I love about perspective is that it can kind of make or break you, in the sense that you can have two people that are put in exactly the same situation, but their perspective of that situation can completely differ. You could have somebody that's goes into a car accident, both people loses their limbs, and the one can kind of come out with a sense of, how could this happen to me? Like, this is such a terrible place, and I hate everything, and this is not fair, and I don't deserve this, etc., etc. And then you could have somebody else that comes out with that was unfortunate and that was tough, but it doesn't change how I want to show up in life. In fact, I'm still going to try and continue to do all the things that I loved. It's just that now I do them differently. And you guys know these stories. You see these guys that like paint with their toes, or paint with like just their mouth or whatever, and are just essentially not willing to let the circumstance kind of hold them back from living a full life, even though there are certain things that make it more difficult. And what I also love about perspective, by the way, is I don't carry, or I try not to carry judgment with the responses of both people. What usually, I can't remember which philosopher was that, who said something along the lines of, like, whether you believe it's going to work out or that you're doomed for life, you're right. Like, whatever it is, you're right. Because what you believe informs what your experience then becomes, right? Like, if you believe this sucks and I'm done, you're right. If you believe, this is just the beginning and it just means that I move in a different direction, but it's still going to be great, you're also right, because your brain is going to go along with whatever it is that you say. So I don't hold too much judgment of saying, this person should look at life this way and that person should look at it that way. It's just their perspective. And you could see it in your own life as well. Like, the perspective that you hold about whatever it is you believe, that's your perspective. And I have learned, or I'm learning, not to call either one better or the other one wrong. But I think where it's better to come from is, how does it serve you? So whatever perspective you hold about life, how does it serve you? Is it helping you grow, or is it kind of making you stagnant? Is it making you live life from a place of love and freedom and joy, or does it fill you with fear? And then that's where you really have a better sense of what your preference is and whether it is worthwhile to change your perspective. But to look at it purely from oh, that one's better, that one's not, is not always helpful, or this one's wrong or that one's right, I find is a limited way of looking at life. But to rather go into, how does my perspective serve me? How does the way I see people and the way I see life help me? Does it aid me in this life experience, or does it kind of hold me back? And then you move from there. But I was thinking about this because I met up with these two lovely old ladies, not too old, but like mature, I'll say. And they're all from my high school. Those who went to school with me will know. I met up with Daniel and Karin. Now, to give you perspective into my life, I went to a lot of different schools, but and all the different schools had a lot. Some had more influence into how I see the world, some not so much. But the one I think that had the most impact on me was my high school, which was an agricultural Afrikaans school. It is very, very interesting, but very, very different. But that's where I met those ladies. And if you went to an Afrikaans school, you know that you refer to the adults as either Dani, or if it's a lady, or if it's a man, it's just what they do. So even in my adult life, I've got these Danis and Omis. But I met up with them, and Dani Karin is, I think, she had such an incredible impact on me, because when I first arrived at the school, I would say that I was like a little bit lost, because how I had grown up is I was that kid that was kind of shipped around everywhere. So at one point I lived with my paternal grandmother, then at one point I lived with my maternal grandmother, then I lived with an aunt, then I lived with my mom, and then I lived with another aunt. So I was that kid. And I know in the Black community, it's quite common. But what usually happens when you grow up like that is you don't really have a strong sense of self, because you tend to want to assimilate to whatever home you're brought into, right? So our disposition for the most part is we want to be liked. So what happens is if you go to live at a particular place and you can kind of gauge like, okay, this is what they like. This is their preference. This is when they're happy. You will tend to want to respond in that way. And as a child, your brain hasn't fully developed yet, so you don't have a strong sense of who you are. If you go there and they like to pray and fast or whatever, chances are you'll do the same thing. If you go to a kind of different setup where you realize, depending on how long you stay, you might want to lean more into that so that you're more accepted. So I think being shipped around, the people I lived with and the spaces that I was growing up with in weren't too different in the sense that they believed the same thing. But I think I was still a little bit confused about my place in the world and what it meant for me to be here and what my contribution should be. Then this one day, I'm walking at school on the school grounds. I think I was going up to the hostel, which was like because it was a boarding school. And this lady calls me and I'm like, what do you want from me? Anyway, she wants me to help her with some school stuff. She wanted me to help her pack stuff into her office. Anyway, we pack the stuff. We start talking. She asks about me. Then it turns out that she's part of this like fraternity, I guess I'd call it, or group at school that's called Land Service. And this is one of those that in today's world would not be for the cool kids. Like it was like a setup for nerds, if I can say. But the whole thing was just around like love for nature, love for God, love for man, love for nature, love for God. So we weren't allowed to litter ever. If you littered, you could actually get kicked out of the organization. We weren't allowed to kill ants, animals, anything living of any sort, because we the whole idea was we were just getting taught to have reverence for the things around us, which is something obviously I didn't really have an experience of that intensely. I went to schools where you weren't allowed to litter, but there you did a pledge. Like if you littered or if you were caught littering, there would be a disciplinary action or hearing or whatever, which seems dramatic, but now I have so much appreciation for it. And then there was love for God. And anyway, I joined somehow, like unsure, but she caught me at the right time because I didn't have a strong sense of who I was then. So I really could have fallen for anything. But she came at the perfect time where I hadn't been snatched up by the terrible groups as yet. Anyway, that becomes such an incredible foundation for the person I become. Because currently I run a sustainability business. So it all kind of came together in the end. And I love doing charitable work. And that's something that I started within that group. But also that's where I learned that I could write and that I loved writing, because we would have these camps. And then after the camp, she said to me, okay, you write about the camp, like write a summary of the camp. And then these things became articles. Then I ended up writing like my first ever article that was published in the local newspaper. And then years later, I found myself working for News 24 as a journalist. So it all kind of came together. And I think it's so beautiful being exposed to different things because you learn skills that you did not even know that you maybe have an affinity to. Anyway, so Land Service becomes what shapes my worldview for a little bit. But then there's also different spaces that I'm also in. There's the kind of religious groups but that are very different. So the one at school is a lot more white church-like. You guys know what I'm talking about. Then the one back home is very black church-like, which is very different. It's very strict. It's very driven by like the perception of things. So how you look matters a lot. So back then, like having nails like this would have gotten me into so much trouble. You had to cover your head. You weren't allowed to dress a certain way. Dating was, what do you mean? What are you even talking about? Like you're going straight to hell. And then the other one that was at school was very relaxed, like just, oh, God loves you, and oh, God is so kind, and God wants to be your friend. That side, there's nothing. Don't come for me for saying this, but I don't ever remember in growing up in the black churches that I went to ever hearing anything around God being a friend. It was, if it ever came up, it was very like touch and go. But for the most part, God was someone you feared and that you trembled at hearing his voice. And it, and I was thinking about it the other day, but when I got saved, my cousin and I were very young. We're probably like around 7, 8-ish. And the OGs will know a man by the name of Bampungose. And Bampungose came to our community and bekunetende, essentially. And that's when I still lived in the rural areas with my grandmother. So anyway, we go to this Dende situation and he's preaching. And I still remember his preach had this one preach where that was like along the lines of Izodlali film. And and essentially what the preach was about was that like when we die, before there's a decision on whether you're going to hell or heaven, we're all going to sit there and there's going to be this television screen and every single thing that you've ever done in your life is going to then like play there. So all the sins, all the terrible things, it's going to be in full view. And essentially then from that point, even you yourself will know where you belong. Like you're never going to be trying to ask God, hey, can I go that side? It's going to be very clear. So he would say this thing of like, and at this point, as someone who's less than 10 years old, I really haven't done much. Like there's not so much for me to be afraid of, but I was so scared of this thing. And I remember like I was telling the other day, the kids where I serve, here at church, was that like they also had this song that we used to sing that used to say, he sees all we do and hears all we say. My Lord is writing all the time. And then like another version of it would say is watching all the time. But essentially the idea was that like God is sitting there, he's seeing all you do, he's seeing all you say, and he's just writing down like, okay, then she said that, then she stole that, then, then she didn't pick that up or whatever the case is. And back then, that used to make me so scared. And that's essentially why I ended up putting my hand up and saying like, I want to get saved because I don't want to go to hell. And I knew that God was seeing all the things that I was doing and that he was writing. And I just didn't want to have this bad record, And so my relationship with God, or lack thereof, I will say, was very much fear-based. And I get the purpose of sermons like that, But what I found as I kind of got older was that they would tend to do the exact opposite of what was intended. What would happen is, yes, you would get somebody to raise their hand up and say that they're getting saved. But thereafter, there would always be this chasm. There would always be this separation where the person can't even build a friendship with God or can't even get to a point where they want to know, what's this God about? Like, what do you think about me? And what does life look like walking with you? It was always just like, I just want to get it right all the time, and I never want to make you angry because you're writing everything down that I do. And so it caused a bit of separation. For a long time, I couldn't break that wall. And I think I couldn't get to the other side where I could start hearing God for myself, or I would want to even be curious about what God had to say about me, what God, about even spending time with God, because I'd always be so afraid that I would just get a long list of all the things that I had done wrong. So for me, it wasn't effective. It was effective in the sense that I tried to stay in line and I tried to stay in the church, but it caused a really massive separation. And now when I think about the presence of God, it's comforting. Like, I love the idea that I walk with God every day. I get into my car and I talk, and we talk about all kinds of stuff. And I say, oh my God, that was so weird. Like, oh my God, this is so interesting. What do you think about that? And I can't crack this. Like, I'm struggling with this thing. Can you help me out? Can you give me perspective? Whatever. Now it's such a beautiful thing. Like, I love that God is with me all the time. Back then, it was very scary because of the perspective that the person who was sharing it with me had, right? So going back then to, going to school and experiencing this almost very relaxed, very loving, very kind, it's not about works, it's not about what you're doing, it's just about relationship, was okay. But I also didn't know how to make space for both, because I would be at school and then I would hear this and it sounded lovely. Then I would go home and then it was like, you need to repent for everything that you've done or else you're going to hell. And I got saved around the 2000s back then when I was younger. So that was a huge selling point because Jesus was coming back in 2000. So most of the people that I know that got saved around that time, we just did it because we were so scared. And Jesus coming back was not a great thing for us. It was like, oh, we're screwed. We got to get our act together. So that was largely my introduction to Christianity until I meet these people and it's the same thing, but it seems like the interpretation is slightly different. Then so I leave school and I go to study. Then I meet poets. Now, poets are so intense, right? Because they're all about like Black liberation. We're reading like very like autobiographies that are more really centered around like the world and what it means, what real freedom means. Like, that's where you meet people who don't have the best things to say about the likes of your Nelson Mandelas or whatever. So it's also very different, very interesting. You're like, oh, there's this whole new world, but also very anti-religion in the sense that they're more like about discovering God for self, right? And that we, in fact, are gods in ourselves. Very, very, very different views, but quite enlightening in being exposed to a different way of thinking. So when I go there, I'm like, oh, now I want to do away with everything that I knew back then and my understanding of religion back then. But also now I even want to do away with these white people, because now I'm like, Aibo, actually, Nina, you stole our land and all of this. And then I'm so angry. Yeah. Anyway, I'm older now. I've learned how to make space for all of it. But all that to say is I have had such a vast experience of life and have had to view it from different points of view and not as an outsider. I think it's different when you are viewing different point of views as someone that already holds a strong belief, but you're viewing it as an outsider. So if you as a Christian are viewing Muslims from an outside perspective versus you actually get in there and you try being a Muslim, or you are a Muslim for that point of view. Again, very different viewing poets from an outside perspective versus being a poet yourself and being in the throes of it, right? And what was unique for me is whenever I was moving from these different groups and these ways of looking at life and living life, I was in them as a participant. So I got to have a deep understanding of what it means to not believe in God. I got a deep understanding what it means to believe in God. I got a deep understanding of what it means to believe in God from a fear perspective versus to believe in God from a love and wanting to understand yourself better and understand the world better and build a relationship with God perspective. And this made me have reverence for all kinds of people who are walking different ways of life. And I mean, one day I remember sitting in a taxi and going, I don't know if it's fair and if it's true for me to say that in this small church that I'm in, like the church that I was in, we were very, very small. There was probably maybe around 30 of us, like at a time on a Sunday. But then there were different groups. Obviously, you had the church in Richards Bay, then you had in Mpangeni, then you had in Durban, so then there'd be more of us. But at that time, there would just be very few of us. But it felt like we also held this very strong belief that we were the only ones that knew the true gospel, and that we were the only ones that knew the right way to God and the right way to do things and the right way to worship and the right way to dress and the right way to do all of these things. And I remember sitting one time and thinking, so in the whole world of 8 billion people, are we saying that we are the only ones that have been chosen to have a true understanding of who God is, that everyone else is in darkness and we are the only ones that get this revelation? I thought, I don't know, because that doesn't make sense, and it doesn't hold true to even my understanding of who God is, because then why would he choose to keep everyone else in the darkness and just reveal it to Tina, little banda, little ngane, there where I'm from? And everyone else that goes to church on Sunday, they are all lost. We are the only ones that know the real truth. I think that's when I became a little bit conflicted about things needing to be one way, or certain groups saying that they're the only ones that have certain revelations and that everyone else is wrong just because we're not in agreement with them. But what I also found is that belief system, it limited how far I could know God, because I could only know him within the confines of this church. I could only know him within the confines of what the people around me believed. Whereas I think often we try to box God, but I think it's much bigger than even what our minds can fathom, right? But that's when I started being open to learning from different people and from different experiences. And ever since then, I've loved perspective. I've loved people who hold perspectives that are different to me, because I think the world can take a lot from you, but what they can't take is what you believe about the world. What they can't take is what your perspective about your life and what happens to you is. And just like that study that I mentioned, that will probably remain pretty constant. And I say this because now when I went to meet with these Danis, now Dani Karine was diagnosed with cancer probably a year ago. And her view of cancer is so interesting in that she said to me, like when she got the news, she received it as information. She's like, oh, okay. It was information, and then she called everybody that she needed to call to say, okay, this is happening. She called her broker to say, look, this is what's happening, and then essentially went to the doctor to understand what is the way forward now. And she is the happiest, chirpiest person I've ever met, but that's what she was like even before. And I remember having a conversation with her, and she was essentially saying to me, they're all at hospice together when they do chemo. And she started asking the other people around, like, hey, what was your reaction when you first got your diagnosis, And then she says, yeah, there was this one very dramatic girl who just said, like, she kept crying nonstop. And we were all like, and I was like, that's so interesting, because that sounds like a normal response to getting cancer, but okay, But then she says, one of the ladies said, look, my belief is that there are different roads, and that you'll travel on a different road, on a different bus, but we're all essentially going to the same destination. So different road, different bus, destination is the same. And I think she was referring to it in the instance that we can all travel this road or journey of life in different ways with different transportation or mode of transport, but ultimately the ending will be the same, in that we will all die. So that's one way. But when I heard that, I was like, that's so beautiful, because I was seeing it even from the lens of like success, from the lens of life in general. Like so many of the things that we pursue is that, like, if you're in pursuit of success, particular success, and you keep looking at other people around you who seem to have reached this success, whether it's sooner or easier or whatever, and you keep going like, why not me? For me, then the answer from that conversation became different road, different bus, same destination. So you may be traveling on a different road towards whatever it is that you are pushing towards. And you may be in a different transportation towards whatever it is that you're pushing towards. But ultimately, if you genuinely believe, the destination will be the same. And I thought that was so beautiful. And I left that gathering with such a newfound appreciation for life, but with a newfound or a more profound reverence for perception. Because this lady's perception was just like, somebody else died with a car accident, or somebody else has this experience, but mine is this. And I think that's okay. And I just thought that's so rich to look at life that way, and it's not even a thing for you. And as I was driving home and I was speaking to God, I was saying, my favorite thing about you is how you continually enrich my perspective. Not so much, I'm not so hung up on my experience. I'm not so hung up on what happens. I'm more hung up on what I believe about what happens to me. Because what I believe about what happens to me and the story that I attach to what happens to me then informs how I will experience whatever it is that is happening to me. And Danny Karin's currently going through chemo, and I don't think I've met any person happier. And it's so interesting for me because someone else could and is in the very same situation, but is experiencing it in a completely different manner. And I just thought perspective is probably the best gift that you can give to yourself. Sharpening your perspective, questioning your perspective, expanding your perspective is the best thing that you can do for yourself, because it informs how you will experience even what some could consider the toughest experiences of your life. And I also realized that as quote unquote young people, we are feeling so depressed and we're feeling so disgruntled because of the perspective that one we hold, but also of the perspectives of the people around us. Because it would be one thing for me to hold one perspective, and then I meet Dani Karin and she says this, and then I go, and then suddenly I'm viewing a situation in a completely different way, right? Just because I exposed myself to people who think differently and who hold a different perspective to me. And I think a lot of the time we live in these echo chambers, right? And what an echo chamber is essentially like this idea that you're in a group and in a setting and in a space where everybody thinks the same way, and there isn't like even conflict in terms of the ideas that you guys hold. So when something happens and you say, oh, I lost my job. This is really, really messed up. Everyone around you in that echo chamber is going to say, yo, that sucks. What are you going to do? Yo, the economy is so tough. Yo, nah, you're screwed, bro. Like, yo, I'm so sorry. This really, really, like, this really, really sucks. Yo, I don't even know what to say to you, you know, versus an echo chamber where somebody says, huh, that's a bit of a curveball, but what do you think it means? Like, is there an opportunity in that? Could you maybe start looking at that business that you've always been wanting to start? Or what about that time where you started making these jerseys, but you stopped? Perhaps maybe while you figure out what to do next, perhaps you do that, you go back to that. There's such a broader perspective there, rather than what you could have probably gone home and felt like. And I thought like, if Tani Karine was in a different group setting, the moment she got her cancer diagnosis and she had people around her who were like, whew, I'm so sorry. What can we do? Let's just be here for you, which is not bad, by the way. It's just a different perspective. I wonder if it would have changed how she experienced chemo and how she experienced this whole journey, right? And we also, at the same table, had Dani Linda, who also got a diagnosis for lupus, I believe. But it's a very hectic autoimmune disease. And she was saying when she got the diagnosis, her initial thing was, oh, I'm dying. I need to get my affairs in order. And then something shifted in her and she felt like, she was like, actually, I'm going to start talking to these lungs and say, like she said, like every day she'd wake up and she'd talk to her lungs and she'd say to them, like, you guys are supposed to be helping me. You are supposed to be doing life with me and you're supposed to be making life easier for me. Why are you turning against me now? Do the right thing. Get yourself together. And she's saying the craziest thing, she's also has started chemo, but she's saying the craziest thing is she's not experiencing any of the symptoms of lupus or of the autoimmune disease. Like she's got it, she's got the diagnosis. And even when she was in hospital, the nurses kept saying to her, here are the pain meds, like you need pain meds. And she was like, I'm not in pain though. And they were like, no, this is a very painful disease. And she was like, I'm not in pain. And the doctor was saying to her, okay, your nails are supposed to look like this. Your skin is supposed to look like this. But she has none of that. And she's like, I mean, I'm going for the treatment, but I believe I'm fine. And I just felt like by being around them, my experience felt so enriched, and there were so many other things that were happening in my own life that I started looking at differently to say, I've always thought that my life is supposed to go this way, or that when I transition to this, it should be 1 + 1 and then it should be, 2 the same way. But from that experience, I learned different road, different bus, but ultimately the destination is the same. So it allowed me to then hold on to my strong belief around the destination, but be not so caught up on the journey itself. And I think sometimes as young people, we feel so disgruntled. One, because we are surrounded by people that hold the same perspective as we do. So when you come back and you say, this thing sucks, everyone at the table agrees with you. And no one can offer a different insight. But I think there's so much merit in opening ourselves up to different groups, opening ourselves up to people who maybe see life slightly differently, so that we can start to view the world and even the circumstances that we have in a different way, and in a way that is more serving to us. And what I have come to believe about perspective, I think perspective is this. I think it's like, when you're walking and you're just feeling sad and you're feeling beat up. Like think of a movie where this person's like walking and they're feeling sad and they feel beat up by the world, and they feel like they're just like everything is just falling apart. And then they're like, have their shoulders down and they've got their head down and they're just walking, like this, and just like, really feeling despondent. And for me, perspective is the person that comes, and as you're doing this, they take your chin and they do this. Whenever somebody offers a different perspective or allows me to see the world or my circumstance in a different manner, it's like they are literally allowing me to put my head up so I can see more than just what's down here. So I can see, one, the world as so much larger than when it feels, when all I can see is this. The world is so much bigger, which means if the world is so much bigger, the possibilities are also endless. It also means that the opportunity for solutions are also endless, right? It's like, it's so vast. There's stars and there's sun and there's trees and it's more than just me seeing my feet. And that's why I think you have to invest in friendships. You have to invest in circles that have rich perspective. You have to invest in circles that when you are looking at life like this, will take their hand, hold your chin and say, how about that? Have you seen that? Have you seen that? Have you seen that? And that way, life will not always just be the same, right? And you won't always just be getting fed whatever life wants to feed you, and you just agree. And I think now, for me, real currency is not what I have. It's not what car I drive. It's not what house I live in. It's my perspective. It's my belief. It's my view of the world. And the same thing holds true. The reason why I was making that example about how I was brought into Christianity and how I was brought into like understanding God is because for the longest time, that way of seeing life made me afraid of God. It made me feel like I had to be a certain way for me to start really like experiencing what it really means to be in relationship with God. It felt like I had to show up only one way, and if I didn't, then I was cast off. But experiencing people who had a much more richer, a much more freer version and view of God made me want to be excited to spend time with God. It made me have like time at a dinner table and we're having a good time, but be so excited to get to my car so I can talk to God about it. And I think a lot of the times we think one way because of how certain ideas have been introduced to us, right? For me, God was introduced in such a limiting way, but now through the different perspective and the different areas I was able to inhabit, God became so much more expansive. And it's still a process of discovery for me. But really, this is to say, it made me want to look at the people in my life and the kind of things that I'm filling my life with and wonder, are they expanding my perspective? Are they enriching my experience of life? And does it make me want to be excited to be alive? Like I spent time with Danny Karine and Danny Linda, and I was excited to be alive. I was excited to be here and just here without feeling like I needed to improve on anything. Like just seeing them relish cake like it might be the last time that they would have it, or like it was the best thing that they've ever had, just made me have an appreciation for even the smallest things in my life. And I think that's really the point of today's episode, is to say, don't get so stuck in your echo chamber that you view life in such a limited way. Visit other echo chambers, visit other, last week we were speaking about traveling and how it expands your world of view. But I think traveling is also a spiritual journey. You can travel inwardly, but you can also travel through different time experiences. You can travel through different thoughts. You can travel through different perspective. So travel through how people view life in different ways that you may maybe not be so accustomed to, and watch how that expands your own view of life. Watch how that expands your own perspective of life. Then you'll find actually the only reason you're so stressed is because you're around people that are constantly on the grind, that are like, we have to go through the next thing. Spend time with people who love yoga, who are about nature, who are like, there's no rush. Life is beautiful. And start to make space for both, right? Like start to make space for, see how all those different viewpoints can serve you in different ways and in different times of your life. I am grateful for all the different experiences that I had, because at different points in my life where maybe I need to relax and not stress so much, I then, pick and I go to those perspectives, and I go to those groups, and I allow that to enrich my life in that moment. At times where maybe I need to be on the, then I borrow from that, but there's space for all of it. And it just gives you it allows you to be here, but it allows you to know how to be here and what ways are best helpful for the different times that you find yourself in. There are certain people in your life that are not conducive to certain occurrences that are happening. For example, when you're going through grief, you might need a different type of people around you. When you're going through an upward mobility and you need to be building and pushing, you might need those kinds of people that are doing that. But when you're going through burnout, you might need the kind of people and the kind of spaces and the kind of thinking that really allows you to lay back, to be calm, to appreciate what's around you. And just a parting thought is, a lot of the times we are told that when you have an idea, don't share it, right? If you want to do something, do it in secret, And I think I see the value of that, but I think it's important to watch why you're doing that, right? To watch where you are coming from. When you are protecting those ideas, when you are moving in secret. Is it from fear, or is it from, in my view, I find that it's more helpful when there's certain things that I don't want to share, I found that it's because I want to protect my perspective about those things. So say, for example, I've decided I want to start a business, and I believe that this is a niche business. I believe there's opportunity there, and I believe it's going to work strongly. I may not share it because I want to protect my perspective. I want to protect my belief. I don't want to share this with somebody who's then going to say, but in this country and that country, or I read this article that's saying that businesses like that are now closing down. Then I start to have a shaky belief system. Then my perspective starts to wobble a little bit, right? Versus I am moving in secret. Because sometimes that thing of moving in secret holds you back from people who could move your mission further. Now you're busy there alone, grinding and struggling, where there are other people that could help you. There are other people that you could bring in who share perspective that is broader, who share perspective that is more positive, and share perspective that builds you up rather than perspective that shrinks you and perspective that makes you afraid of what could go wrong. There are people who hold perspective that will tell you, ooh, in fact, you could add this. Oh, what about if you added this and you changed it like this or whatever? Then it expands. So a lot of the times, it's not that you need to move in secret. It's that you need to have discernment, and you need to look at the people around you and maybe have an honest conversation about whether their perspectives build you up or break you down, whether their perspective enlarge you or make you want to shrink. I think sometimes we make it seem like, oh no, you need to protect your things. No, sometimes the circles you're in are just not safe. They don't broaden your way of viewing life. And now I know that there are people who my dreams are safe with. But more than that, there are people who expand on my dreams, who, when I tell them about it, they're like, hey, this thing, in fact, could be a franchise. Don't just think about the one. It could even be more, versus people who could say, I hear you, but I don't know. I think be a little bit careful, or whatever the case is. So I think the currency that we should all be after, more than just the material and making money, is the people around us and the perspectives and their views of life. Because whether you're rich, whether you're poor, the perspectives that you have and the perspectives of the people around you are going to determine how long you can stay in either one of those realities. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you really enjoyed this episode, and I hope you can start, looking out for your own perspective, really start sharpening it and asking, like, is it really enriching? Or, because sometimes we're those kinds of people where the moment you have an idea, you are the first person to shut it down. Like, you're not even waiting for somebody to shut it down for you. You shut it down yourself. And that's because of your limited perspective. That's because of your negative disposition of life. If you are like that, start going to spend time with those people who are just brazen, who don't believe in failure, who try all kinds of things and don't care how many times it doesn't work, but they just keep trying. That can be infectious. It can rub off on you. And I just love that. I love that as I grow, I'm becoming more and more open to being in spaces that allow me to see the world and allow me to see myself in a different light. Sometimes comfort is not the best thing for us. Like, sometimes people that agree with us are not the best things for life, for us. Go to people who will shake things up a little bit and see how that serves you as you live and as you grow. Thank you so much for joining An Extraordinary Take. Please remember to subscribe and do share if this helped you, and let me know also in the comments. Goodbye.